Greetings and welcome to Plates and Plots Dinner Theater online. This week, our virtual vignette is from our show Radio Lala, which we have staged more than once. We really like this show. The full live show features us as 1940s radio actors performing 3 short one-acts. Well, this week, we'll feature one of those one-acts, our version of Pickwick Papers, originally by Charles Dickens. So please join us in our adapted, reduced, and zoomified version. The place, Pickwick Club, also Mrs. Bardell's boarding house. The time, Victorian England, afternoonish, probably a Tuesday.
The corresponding society of the Pickwick Club was one of the most unusual fraternal organizations ever founded in London. Please join us for tea as we listen in on our 2 gentlemen as they converse in Mr. Pickwick's apartment on Goswell Street.
I say, Mr. Pickwick, these are very fine quarters you have here.
Thank you, Mr. Winkle, thank you. I find them quite suitable. Mrs. Bardell, my housekeeper, is a remarkable woman.
But how do you manage without a manservant?
Well, that is the very subject that I'm going to speak to Mrs. Bardell about. Will you excuse me? Mrs. Bardell? Mrs. Bardell?
Yes, sir.
Ah, Mrs. Bardell. There's something that I've been wanting to ask you for quite a while now.
Oh, what is that, sir?
Do you find it to be a much greater expense to keep 2 people than to keep 1, Mrs. Bardell?
Mr. Pickwick, why, what a question!
Well, what do you?
That depends a good deal upon the person, you know, Mr. Pickwick, and whether it's a saving and careful person.
That's very true. It's very true. The person I have my eye on, I think, possesses those qualities.
Mr. Pickwick!
To tell you the truth, Mrs. Bardell, I've made up my mind.
Dear me, sir.
You'll think it very strange that I have never consulted you about this matter and never even mentioned it, eh? Well, what do you think?
Mr. Pickwick, you're very kind, sir, to make this proposal.
Well, it'll save you a good deal of trouble, won't it?
Oh, I never thought of the trouble, sir. And of course, I should take more trouble to please you then now than ever. But it is so kind of you, sir, Mr. Pickwick, to have so much consideration for my loneliness.
Ah, to be sure, I never even thought of that. When I'm in town, you'll always have someone to sit with you.
I'm sure I ought to be a very happy woman. Oh, you dear man.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, you good, kind, loving dear.
Oh, no, Mrs. Bardell, my good woman, please consider if anybody should come.
Oh, let them come. I'll never leave you, my good, dear, kind soul.
Oh! She's fainted. Oh, what a situation. Oh, Mrs. Bardell, please. Mr. Winkle.
Mr. Pickwick, what is going on?
Oh, my good friend, Mr. Winkle.
What is the matter?
Well, I don't know. Please help me lead this woman downstairs.
Oh, I'm better now.
Let me take you downstairs, madam.
Oh, thank you. I'm fine. I shall meet you downstairs, Mr. Pickwick.
Really, Mr. Winkle? I cannot conceive what came over that woman. I had merely announced to her my intention of keeping a manservant when she fainted, and I could not bring her to her senses. Very extraordinary.
A few weeks later, the friends were having supper when news came which caused great consternation indeed.
Ah, Winkle, my good friend. What have you there?
I called at the post office and found this letter for you.
Well, I don't really recognize the hand. Here, let me open it. Let's see. Mercy on us! What, this must be a joke. It can't be true. Freeman's Court, Cornhill, August 28th. Bardell against Pickwick. It's a lawsuit. Mr. Samuel Pickwick, sir, having been instructed by Mrs. Martha Bardell to commence an action against you for a breach of promise of marriage, for which the plaintiff sets her damages at £1,500. We request to know by return post the name of your attorney in London. We, sir, are your obedient servants, Dodson and Fogg. Mrs. Barnell would never do it. She would never do it. She doesn't have the heart to do it. She hasn't had the case to do it. This is ridiculous. It is a vile attempt to extort money. No one has ever heard me address her in any way, but as a lodger would address a landlady. Well, who has ever seen me with her? Well, not even you have seen me with her, my friend.
Except on one occasion.
When was that?
I don't know how it happened, mind, but she was certainly reclining in your arms when I came to call on you that one time.
Oh, I remember now. When I told her I would engage a manservant, she fainted and fell into my arms.
And you were soothing her anguish.
I can't deny that. What a dreadful conjunction of appearances. I'll go see this Dodson and Fogg. I'll go to London tomorrow and explain the whole situation to them.
Tomorrow.
Dodson and Fogg, I believe. Which of you do I have the pleasure of speaking?
I am Fogg, sir.
And I am Samuel Pickwick.
Oh, yes. You are the defendant, sir, in Bardell against Pickwick. Oh, please do sit down.
I came here to express the astonishment with which I received your letter of the other day, and to inquire on what grounds of action you have against me.
Oh, for the grounds of action, sir, you may consult your own conscience.
Am I to understand that this is really your intention to proceed with this action, and that the damages are actually set at £1,500?
Yes, sir.
Very well, sir. Very well. But before I go, permit me to say that of all the disgraceful and rascally proceedings...
Just 1 moment, Mr. Pickwick. Of all the disgraceful and rascally proceedings, I believe you said.
I did. I said, sir, that of all the disgraceful and rascally proceedings that have ever been attempted, that this one is the most so.
Now, Mr. Pickwick, perhaps you would like to call us swindlers. Oh, pray do, if you feel so disposed, sir.
I do! You are swindlers!
Very good. Do go on. Oh, you had better call us thieves, sir. Or perhaps you would like to assault me. Oh, pray do it, sir, if you would. I will not resist.
I believe I'm finished now. Oh, good day, Mr. Fogg. Good day.
And so the day of the trial finally arrived. Mr. Winkle accompanied Mr. Pickwick, as good friends do, to help him prepare for the great ordeal.
Gentlemen of the jury, never In all my years of my professional experience, have I approached a case with feelings of such deep emotion. My abused and injured client, Mrs. Bardell, will now testify as to Mr. Pickwick's breach of promise of marriage.
Yes, gentlemen, we were to be married. Mrs. Bardell, he says to me, Mrs. Bardell, do you think it's a much greater expense to keep two people rather than one?
You have heard, gentlemen, a clear breach of promise of marriage. I should like to supply as evidence 2 letters. They are not open declarations of love. They are letters that must be viewed with a cautious, suspicious eye. Dear Mrs. B, chops and tomato sauce, yours, Pickwick. Gracious heavens, such skullduggery have we here. The other. Dear Mrs. B, I shall not be home until tomorrow. Don't trouble yourself about the warming pan. See how artfully contrived are these letters. You may go back to your seat now, Mrs. Bardell. I call to the stand Elizabeth Cluppins. Now, Mrs. Cluppins, have you ever received love letters?
Oh, yes, sir. My husband sent them to me all the time, before we were married.
Oh, did he ever, in those letters, call you tomato sauce or chops?
No, sir. He never called me such things.
Oh, well, what did he call you?
He called me Duck. That was because he was particularly fond of ducks. Now, perhaps if he had been as fond of chops and tomato sauce, he might have called me those names. Out of affection, don't you know?
Yes, well, thank you, Mrs. Cluppins. You may step down. I call Mr. Winkle. Now, Mr. Winkle, are you a particular friend of the defendant?
Well, yes, I am.
Okay, now, sir, if I am not mistaken, you went to the home of the plaintiff, Mrs. Bardell, on purpose to see your friend, Mr. Pickwick, on the morning with which we are concerned.
But yes, I did, sir.
Now, tell the gentlemen of the jury what you saw on entering the defendant's room on this particular morning.
Well, I saw the defendant, the Pickwick that is, holding the plaintiff in his arms, with his hand clasping her waist, and the plaintiff appeared to have fainted away.
And what did you hear him say?
I heard him call Mrs. Bardell a good creature, and heard him ask her to compose herself for what a situation it was if anybody should come, or words to that effect.
Did you ever hear the defendant refer to Mrs. Bardell as tomato sauce or chops?
Of course not. Those nicknames would be ludicrous.
Others may find such pet names as ludicrous, but not the intended recipients. That will be all, Mr. Winkle. Step down.
That's right, sir. Those were his very words. Mrs. Bardell, says he. Mrs. Bardell, this extra person won't be too expensive for me, and it'll save you a deal of trouble. And when I am in doubt, you'll have somebody to keep you company.
Gentlemen of the jury, this wretch, this cur, this villain known as Pickwick is guilty.
And he's never since mentioned matrimony to me.
Gentlemen of the jury, take pity on this poor, abused, friendless widow who was so misled by the villainous Pickwick, whose arm you have heard in this court encircled her waist.
Fainted right in his arms, dead away.
Thank you, gentlemen of the jury. We rest our case.
Later that day.
The jury reached a verdict.
They awarded Mrs. Bardell £750.
Jeez, tomato sauce and chops. Terms of endearment. It's lucky you didn't call her precious. Well, Mr. Pickwick, what is to be done now?
If I may, Mr. Winkle, allow me to give you a piece of advice. Never allow yourself to be alone with a single member of the opposite sex, no matter how honorable or how innocuous your intentions may be. I can assure you that such a situation can amount to nothing but trouble.
Thank you so much for attending our virtual performance. We hope that you will continue to share our links and maybe watch some of our other posts and consider supporting local theater at our PayPal link that is posted in the comments. We will eventually be back in our theater here in Lexington, South Carolina. In the meantime, we are Plates and Plots online. I'm Heather, and I'm playing Mrs. Bardell.
And I'm Tracy. I played Mr. Fogg.
And I'm Jen, and I play Samuel Pickwick.
I'm Ty, I play Mr. Winkle.
I'm Maria. I played the narrator and Elizabeth Cluppins.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.